Welcome to the Weekly Dose Podcast, your one-stop shop for the weekly news in incretin mimetic therapies, with your host, man on the Mounjaro, Dave Knapp. Welcome to the Weekly Dose Podcast. I'm Dave Knapp, man on the Mounjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. That's why you're here. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Mounjaro, Zepbound. That pen is the reason it has you coming to the Weekly Dose to get your weekly installment of all things GLP-1, all the news about incretin mimetic therapies that I find relevant or interesting throughout the week, or that my followers find interesting and send to me. Thank you to those of you who do that. Clokey, Sue, Matt, Mr. McIntosh, I'm looking in your direction. So thank you all. Keep them coming to mounjaroman@gmail.com. But thank you also to those who have followed the podcast so far. Really, really appreciate that. All those have downloaded it. Then thank you also, especially to those who have given it a 5-star rating and review. That makes all the difference in the world in helping to get the news out about this podcast. But let's get into this week's news. Undoubtedly, in my opinion, the biggest news of the week is we have the Mounjaro 12.5 milligram dose added back to the FDA shortage list. So I want to just do a quick flyover of what that actually means and what it doesn't mean. So whether you're on Zepbound or Mounjaro or any GLP-1 for that matter, I'm sure that you've struggled with accessibility issues, right? But when the FDA reports on their website, and I'll link it in the description and in the show notes of this video, when the FDA reports on a shortage, it's the manufacturer basically raising their hand with the FDA and said, we don't have enough product to keep our wholesalers supplied with the amount that they want, right? And so what that effectively means is the 12.5 milligram dose, Eli Lilly can't keep up with for Mounjaro. Now, I think it's just a matter of time before we see Zepbound pop up on this. I think they're probably doing everything they can to avoid that, but I'm hearing it all over. My Facebook group, Zepbound for Weight Loss, is almost to 8,000 members already, and it's people who are just getting on Zepbound, and I'm hearing it more and more. And it's not, the concerning part for me is that it's all the doses. It's different areas of the country. It's the 2.5, it's the 5, it's the upper doses. So you're seeing it. And I think we'll continue to see that. And I think it's only a matter of time before those doses hit the FDA shortage list. Of course, I will keep you up to date. That's part of the reason you follow on the pen. But there's other news, right? Some more exciting news. So Novo Nordisk announced an agreement to pay Aerocal Therapeutics. This is another pharmaceutical company. Specifically, they are a Swiss biotech firm who hold an asset that is very interesting. So this is a novel obesity treatment asset, right? It's known as ERA 379. At least that's what we're surmising the molecule is. And like I said, it is a novel medicine for obesity, which means it's brand new, right? And so they've agreed to pay 235 million euros, or about $255 million, to acquire this asset, essentially. And it's a small molecule, which is very interesting that they've discovered using zebrafish larvae to assess the impact of molecules on food intake. And what they have found is that they believe this small molecule that they've discovered controls appetite and body weight through a brand new mechanism. So we're not talking about incretin therapies. We're not talking about GLP-1s. We're talking about a whole nother ball game in obesity treatment. And of course, these big tech, pharmaceutical companies have money to spend, right? You see Eli Lilly just acquired another company, I believe, that was studying hibernating squirrels, right? To find out what it is about these hibernating squirrels that maybe acts on their metabolism. And so you just see these just millions and millions of dollars being poured into these companies that have some kind of novel approaches to obesity medicine. So this will be a really interesting one to follow over the next few years, obviously. And again, it's exciting to kind of think about the obesity medicine world beyond simple incretin therapies, the ones that we're so excited about now. So interesting news on the Novo Nordisk front. In some more frustrating news, we've got North Carolina. So the state of North Carolina announced that they are discontinuing coverage of anti-obesity medication for state employees due to high costs and their inability to successfully negotiate costs down with the drug companies. Now, this is unfortunate on a lot of levels. The first level that I find it unfortunate is that you're talking about North Carolina, where we've seen Eli Lilly invest probably over $1 billion in infrastructure. They brought tens of thousands of jobs to North Carolina for the development specifically of these GLP-1 medications and the manufacturing of these GLP-1 medications. And now you see the state sort of turning their back on the people who need these medicines, saying we can't do this in an affordable way. But, it does speak to a larger issue that we have with these GLP-1 medications, whether we're talking about state employers or really any employer. The cost of adding GLP-1s to insurance companies is very high, right? Over the long term, the payback is great. Obviously, we all know that, and we understand that you have a reduction in things like heart attacks and strokes. You don't have to treat maybe at the same level some of the comorbidities like high blood pressure and sleep apnea. So we think, long term that these GLP-1 medications have the opportunity to drive down the cost of healthcare in a really big way. Right. But that's not the way insurance companies look at it. The insurance companies look at it like, I'm going to be covering Dave for, 2-3 years tops. And then Dave is somebody else's problem. So if I give Dave incretin therapies now to bring his weight down, it's some other insurance company that's going to benefit from that. So you see insurance companies sort of being at a strategic disadvantage now to add these to their formulary. But then, the flip side of this is I always look at where's the waste really coming from, right? And the PBMs pocketing 30% of these of the cost of these medications. That's where the waste is in this healthcare system. We need PBM reform, and we need it like yesterday. So my heart goes out to the people in North Carolina who also have much more limited access to compound medications as well due to some legislation that has been passed there as well. So my heart goes out to those in North Carolina. Please reach out, mounjaroman@gmail.com. I do have some relationships that are developing with some people who can provide access to branded medication to people who are without it. And just send me an email, mounjaroman@gmail.com, and I see what I can do to help you out. So another interesting piece of news this week was that you saw, and it, talking about shortages and all of that, you saw Eli Lilly announced that they will be launching Mounjaro for obesity and diabetes in the UK with their KwikPen. So the KwikPen has yet to achieve FDA approval, is my understanding. I haven't seen, other than hearing Anat Ashkenazi on the Q2 call from last year talking about that being in the plans to launch the KwikPen, which is, again, the multi-dose pen. So you've got the Mounjaro pens, which are a single dose, but they've got their own version of like the Ozempic pen that's multi-dose that can be adjusted, right? So they've got their KwikPen. It'll be the first launch of the KwikPen product, of the Mounjaro in the KwikPen in any market. So Eli Lilly basically came to the United Kingdom, working with their regulatory agency over there, basically said, if we can put this in the KwikPen, we can bring it to market virtually immediately, which just bolsters what we've talked about for a long, long time. And on the pen, and that's that these pens are a real kink in the supply chain, very difficult to manufacture, a lot of moving parts, frankly, a lot of waste. You saw that the single dose vials were launched in Canada earlier this year. So good for our friends in Canada, but there are also facing shortages there in Canada, even with the single dose vials, which arguably would be the easiest to manufacture, right? So you've got the two launches in non-US markets. You've got Canada and now the United Kingdom, Canada with the single dose vials and the United Kingdom with the KwikPen. Be very interesting to see how this all shakes out, right? Because they literally announced this rollout, which will be happening in the coming weeks, the same week that you saw Mounjaro 12.5 show up on shortage here in the United States. So I have a big problem with drug manufacturers launching, especially these GLP-1 medications, which I think we're going to learn long-term that for patients, this roller coaster in doses is not good, right? For the long-term efficacy of these medications, for people to be able to, especially from the obesity side, being able to extract as much weight loss out of each dose as possible. This yo-yo roller coaster, bouncing back and forth between doses because of scarcity is not good for the patient, right? So they've really, in my mind, got no business launching in other markets when they're unable to serve the markets that they're currently in, right? That's just my own 10 cents on, what I think is going on here and why I think it's unfair to people in markets that are already being served with these medications. Moving on to some interesting news. So basically what happened this week is you saw a new survey come out of people who stopped taking semaglutide, and it showed that 2/3 of the people after a year who stopped semaglutide maintain their weight loss. That's a huge number and flies in the face of the SURMOUNT study for tirzepatide that came out towards the end of last year that basically said, hey, most people who stopped tirzepatide cold turkey, at least in this trial, gained back a good percentage of their weight. Well, so this study, well, if you can call it a study, is more of a gathering of data from Epic Systems, who, you probably have logged on to your portal, patient portal, and Epic is one of the biggest ones. So Epic took some data that they surveyed and found that 2/3 of patients who used semaglutide correctly, it states, were able to keep the weight off, right? 18% of them, however, regained all of that weight. So just interesting to see, more and more information comes out about this. And I think really the underlying data here, the big takeaway to extrapolate from this is that at the end of the day, we all respond differently to these medications, right? We have super responders, non-responders, and we have just quite the spectrum of how people respond. In my own experience, just going off of tirzepatide for 2 months now, even though I switched to semaglutide, probably arguably been trying and tracking more than any time during this whole journey on GLP-1s, and I've continued to kind of slowly gain weight back. So I will be going back on Mounjaro, a little bit of breaking news here that I don't usually talk about, my own journey here on the weekly dose, but I will be going back to tirzepatide for that reason, right? Because I think there's something special for me, my broken metabolism, my type 2 diabetes, where that GIP component was actually giving me something that I really, really needed that semaglutide has, to this point, been unable to give me. So that is the news for this week. There's going to be a lot more news coming up this week. We've got a super exciting earnings call coming from Eli Lilly. It'll also be their forward-facing call for the year, where they kind of talk about some of the exciting things that they have going on in the pipeline. These are always really fun. I covered them on my YouTube channel, so make sure you go over to my YouTube channel. I'll link it in the show notes. Give it a subscription. It's totally free. Just hit subscribe. Hit the little bell notifications on one of my videos. That way you'll get a notification when I upload a new video, because that is a really fun one to do when I kind of wrap up what they had to say, because there's usually some breaking news in the world of Mounjaro and Zepbound. We also will hear probably a little bit more about retatrutide and orforglipron, some of their exciting medications that they have in clinical trials currently. Thanks again for being a part of the Weekly Dose podcast. Remember to give it a 5-star rating and drop a review. If you've enjoyed this so far, would appreciate you dropping a little review and sharing this somewhere where somebody else might find it useful as well. Until next week, we will see you on the pen. Welcome to the Weekly Dose podcast, your one-stop shop for the weekly news and incretin mimetic therapies, with your host, man on the Mounjaro, Dave Knapp.